What if I told you that right now, as you're listening to this, someone could be hearing your thoughts? Not reading your mind through some mystical power, but literally hearing the voice in your head as clearly as I'm speaking to you now. You'd probably think I was crazy. You'd laugh it off. But Ethan Blackwood didn't laugh when it started happening to him at 23 years old. He couldn't laugh because he was too busy going insane. This is the story of a man who gained the most coveted superpower imaginable, only to discover it was actually his worst nightmare. Tonight's story is titled, He Could Hear People's Thoughts Until They Started Lying. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, if you're wearing headphones, perfect. If not, you might want to put some on. Or you can lower the volume now, just enough so my voice blends gently with the stillness of your room. Close your eyes. Let your shoulders sink just a bit more into your pillow. You don't have to do anything. Just listen. It started on a Tuesday morning in September. Ethan Blackwood was standing in line at Morrison's coffee shop in downtown Portland, scrolling through his phone like any other 23-year-old marketing coordinator. The barista, a girl with purple hair and tired eyes, was taking forever with the customer ahead of him. Then he heard it. God, this guy's order is so complicated. Just pick a coffee and move on. Dude. Ethan looked up from his phone. The purple-haired barista was smiling sweetly at the customer, but her lips weren't moving. Yet he'd heard her voice as clear as day, dripping with annoyance. He blinked hard. Lack of sleep, maybe. He'd been pulling late nights at the agency, working on the Henderson account. Finally, okay, next. There it was again. The barista's voice, but her mouth was closed. She was looking directly at Ethan now, that same customer service smile plastered on her face. What can I get started for you? She said aloud. Medium coffee. Black? Ethan stammered. Boring. But at least it's simple. Ethan's hands started shaking. He fumbled for his wallet, dropped it, picked it up. The barista, her name tag read Zoe, kept smiling, but in his head, her voice continued. Is this guy okay? He looks like he's about to have a panic attack. Here you go, Zoe said, handing him the coffee. Have a great day. Weirdo. Ethan grabbed his coffee and practically ran out of the shop. For the next 3 days, Ethan convinced himself it was stress. Auditory hallucinations weren't uncommon in people under pressure, right? He'd Googled it obsessively. Sleep deprivation could cause all sorts of mental glitches. But then it happened at work. Ethan was sitting in the conference room, listening to his boss, Rebecca Walsh, present the quarterly numbers. She was going through the slides methodically, her voice steady and professional. Our conversion rates increased by 15% this quarter, Rebecca announced to the room. Thanks to me working 18-hour days while you idiots played ping-pong in the break room. Ethan's coffee cup slipped from his fingers. The ceramic mug shattered on the conference table, sending hot liquid splashing across his laptop. Ethan. Rebecca snapped aloud. What is wrong with you? Christ. First he's been spacing out all week, now he's destroying company property. Maybe I should start looking for his replacement. I'm sorry, Ethan muttered, grabbing napkins to clean up the mess. I haven't been sleeping well. None of us have been sleeping well. That's called having a job. But Rebecca's face showed concern. Why don't you head home early today? Get some rest. The discrepancy between her thoughts and her words made Ethan's skin crawl. By the end of the week, Ethan could hear everyone's thoughts within about a 10-foot radius. The grocery store cashier thinking about her boyfriend's lies. The bus driver cursing at traffic. His neighbor Mrs. Patterson mentally judging his appearance as he checked his mail. It was overwhelming. Constant. Like having a dozen conversations happening in his head at once, none of which he'd asked to be part of. He started avoiding people. Ordered groceries online. Worked from home when possible. But even then, he could hear his upstairs neighbor Jake thinking about his fantasy football lineup at 2 in the morning. The worst part? Everyone was thinking things they'd never say out loud. Dark things. Cruel things. Things that made Ethan realize how much people lied, even to themselves. His girlfriend, Amanda Rodriguez, came over that Friday night. She'd been texting him all week, worried about his strange behavior. You look terrible, she said, settling onto his couch. When's the last time you showered? He looks worse than terrible. He looks sick. Maybe mentally sick. Oh God, what if he's having a breakdown? What if I have to deal with this long term? I'm fine, Ethan lied. Just tired. Amanda cuddled up next to him, running her fingers through his unwashed hair. I love you, she whispered against his neck. I love the idea of you. But this version of you? This scared, paranoid version? I don't know if I can handle this. Ethan pulled away from her. I think you should go. What? Why? Thank God. I was hoping you'd give me an excuse to leave. Please, Amanda said aloud. Talk to me. Whatever's going on, we can work through it together. No, we can't. This is too much. I'm 22 years old. I shouldn't have to be anyone's therapist. Just go, Amanda. She left, and Ethan heard her thoughts all the way down the hallway. I'm going to break up with him. I have to. I can't save someone who won't let me help. Ethan spent the weekend researching everything he could about telepathy, psychic phenomena, and auditory hallucinations. Most of it was garbage, crystal healing websites, and conspiracy theories. But buried in a forum for people with unusual experiences, he found a post that made his blood run cold. A user named ThoughtListener42 had written, Day 23 of hearing everyone's thoughts. I can't leave my apartment anymore. The things people think about each other, about themselves, it's destroying my faith in humanity. If anyone else is experiencing this, please message me. I'm starting to think I'm not crazy. The post was 3 months old. The user hadn't been active since. Ethan sent a private message anyway. The response came within hours. Thank God someone else is going through this. My name is Trevor Collins. I live in Seattle. It started for me after I got hit by lightning during a thunderstorm. What triggered yours? Ethan thought back. There had been that weird electrical storm the night before it all started. He'd been walking home from the gym when lightning struck a transformer near his apartment building. The power had gone out for 6 hours. He told Trevor about the storm. Fuck, came the response. That's exactly what happened to me. Electrical surge, then 3 days later, boom. Other people's thoughts flooding in like a broken dam. They talked for hours through the messaging system. Trevor had been dealing with it for 4 months now. He'd lost his job, his relationship, most of his friends. The constant invasion of other people's minds had turned him into a hermit. But here's the thing, Trevor typed. I've been keeping a journal, documenting everything I hear. And I'm starting to notice patterns. Rules, maybe. What kind of rules? People's thoughts, they are not always honest. Just like their words. The mind lies too, Ethan. And when it does, I can't hear those thoughts. This was the breakthrough Ethan needed. Over the next week, he started paying closer attention to when he couldn't hear people's thoughts. His co-worker Dylan was thinking about stealing office supplies, and Ethan heard every detail of his petty theft plans. But when Dylan was in the break room telling everyone about his weekend hiking trip, which Ethan knew for a fact was a lie because Dylan had spent the weekend playing video games, Ethan heard nothing. Radio silence. The pattern became clear. He could only hear people's genuine thoughts. When they were lying to themselves, creating false narratives, or engaging in self-deception, their minds went quiet. It was fascinating and terrifying at the same time. Amanda came by his apartment one more time, ostensibly to pick up some things she'd left behind. I'm worried about you, she said, gathering her books from his shelf. I'm not worried. I'm relieved. This is my excuse to end things cleanly. I think we should take a break, she continued. A permanent break. But I'll let him think it's temporary so he doesn't completely fall apart. Maybe you're right, Ethan said. He's agreeing too easily. Does he want this to end too? Good. This is working out perfectly. I still care about you, Amanda said, giving him a hug goodbye. But as she held him, her mind went completely silent. She was lying to herself about caring, creating a false narrative to make herself feel better about abandoning him. And in that moment of self-deception, Ethan couldn't hear her thoughts at all. The real horror began when Ethan realized what the silence meant. People weren't just lying to others. They were lying to themselves constantly, creating elaborate justifications for their worst impulses, convincing themselves they were good people while doing terrible things. His boss Rebecca, who'd seemed genuinely concerned about his well-being, went silent whenever she was in the middle of planning to fire someone. She'd convince herself it was for the good of the company and helping them find a better fit elsewhere. The self-deception was so complete that her mind became a void. His neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who baked cookies for everyone in the building, went silent when she was gossiping about the single mother on the third floor. She'd convinced herself that spreading rumors about the woman's parenting was legitimate concern rather than cruel judgment. Even his own mother, during their weekly phone calls, would go silent whenever she was pretending to be interested in his life. She'd call dutifully every Sunday, ask about his job and his girlfriend, but her mind would go completely quiet because she was performing the role of a caring mother rather than actually caring. The silence was worse than the cruel thoughts. At least when people were being genuinely awful, there was honesty in it. But the silence represented something more sinister, the human capacity for self-deception, for rewriting reality to make themselves the hero of every story. Trevor stopped responding to messages after 2 weeks of their correspondence. Ethan tried calling, but the number was disconnected. Worried, he drove to Seattle to check on him. Trevor's apartment building was one of those converted warehouses in the industrial district. The landlord, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, let Ethan into Trevor's unit after he claimed to be a concerned cousin. The apartment was a disaster. Empty food containers everywhere, blackout curtains covering every window, and covering every wall, floor to ceiling, were sheets of paper covered in Trevor's handwriting. Ethan read a few pages. They were transcripts of people's thoughts, dated and timed with obsessive precision. But as the dates progressed, the handwriting became more erratic and the content more disturbing. Day 67. The woman at the grocery store was thinking about killing her husband. She spent 20 minutes in the pasta aisle fantasizing about antifreeze in his coffee. But when she got home and kissed him hello, her mind went silent. She's convinced herself she loves him. Day 89. I can hear the serial killer who lives in the building across the street. He's planning his next victim. Detailed thoughts about methodology, location, disposal. But when he talks to his mother on the phone, silence. He's convinced himself is a good son. Day 103. I tried to warn people. Went to the police about the serial killer. They think I'm insane. Of course they do. I sound insane. But I can hear him right now, thinking about the woman he's been stalking. She has no idea. Day 115. The serial killer went silent mid-thought yesterday, right in the middle of planning. I think he's starting to lie to himself about what he is, calling it something else, justifying it. The silence is spreading. Even monsters learn to lie to themselves. The final entry was just one line, repeated over and over in increasingly shaky handwriting. The silence is everywhere. The silence is everywhere. The silence is everywhere. Trevor was gone. His bed was made, his dishes were clean, and there was no sign of a struggle. He'd simply vanished. Driving back to Portland, Ethan understood what had happened to Trevor. The weight of other people's thoughts was crushing, but the weight of their silence was worse. To know that most human kindness was performance, that most moral behavior was self-deception, that even love was often just a story people told themselves, it was too much for anyone to bear. But Ethan had an advantage Trevor didn't have. He'd figured out the paraphernalia, and more importantly, he'd started to understand why it was happening. Back in his apartment, Ethan sat down and wrote his own journal entry. Day 12. I think I know what this is. It's not telepathy. It's not a superpower. It's punishment. The lightning didn't give us an ability, it gave us a burden. We can hear truth, but only truth. And the horrible realization is that most people don't think in truth most of the time. They think in comfortable lies, in justifications, in elaborate stories that cast them as the hero or the victim, never the villain. The silence isn't an absence of thought. It's the presence of self-deception. And self-deception might be the most human trait of all. As he wrote, Ethan became aware of his own thoughts. Was he lying to himself right now? Creating a grand narrative about punishment and truth to make sense of something that might just be a neurological disorder? His mind went silent. Over the following months, Ethan found others like him and Trevor. Always the same trigger, electrical storms, lightning strikes, power surges. Always the same timeline, 3 days from the incident to the first voices. There was Bethany Chen in San Francisco, who'd been struck by lightning while hiking. She'd lasted 6 months before checking herself into a psychiatric hospital. Marcus Thompson in Chicago, who'd been in his car when lightning hit a power line above him. He'd made it 8 months before disappearing entirely, leaving behind only a note that said, "I can't tell the difference between their lies and my own anymore." Isabella Kowalski in Miami, who'd been on a boat during an electrical storm. She'd started a support group for people with unusual auditory experiences, but it had disbanded after 3 meetings. "Nobody wants to hear the truth about themselves," she told Ethan during their one phone conversation. "Even the people going through the same thing I am." Each of them had discovered the same terrible truth. Humans were capable of extraordinary self-deception. The lies they told others were nothing compared to the lies they told themselves. And once you could hear the difference between truth and self-deception, you realized how rarely people thought in actual truth. The breaking point came when Ethan visited his parents for Christmas dinner. His father, Robert Blackwood, greeted him at the door with a warm hug and a smile. "Son, good to see you. You look great." "He looks terrible. Thin, pale, like he hasn't slept in months. What the hell has he been doing to himself?" "Thanks, Dad. You too." His mother, Linda, bustled over with her usual fussing energy. "Are you eating enough? You're so skinny. I made your favorite pot roast with those little carrots you like." "I made pot roast because it's cheap and feeds a lot of people. Is never even liked carrots, but I keep buying them because I want to believe I know what my own son likes." The evening progressed like a normal family dinner, but Ethan was listening to a constant stream of his parents' real thoughts. His father thinking about how disappointed he was in Ethan's career, his mother wondering if she'd failed as a parent. Both of them going through the motions of familial love while secretly feeling like strangers to their own son. But then something strange happened. During dessert, his mother started talking about a story she'd seen on the news about a young man who'd helped rescue people from a house fire. "It just reminds you that there are still good people in the world," she said. "Heroes who risk everything for strangers. I wish Ethan was more like that. Brave, selfless, someone I could be proud of." "I'm proud of you, you know," she continued aloud. "Both of you boys. You turned out to be such good men." And then, mid-thought, her mind went silent. Ethan realized his mother was lying to herself. She was creating a narrative where she was proud of him to avoid facing the truth about her disappointment. The silence felt like a wall slamming down between them. But it was his father who delivered the final blow. "You know, Ethan," Robert said, cutting into his pie, "your mother and I were just talking about how well you're doing. Successful career, nice apartment, good head on your shoulders. We're worried about him. He seems unstable, paranoid. Linda thinks he might be having a nervous breakdown, but she won't admit it out loud because she doesn't want to face the possibility that her son is mentally ill. We love you, kiddo," his father continued, "no matter what." And then his father's mind went silent too. The "no matter what" was a lie. There were definitely conditions to their love, conditions Ethan was already failing to meet. But they'd convinced themselves they were unconditionally loving parents, and in doing so, had made their minds impenetrable to him. Ethan excused himself to the bathroom and locked the door. For the first time in months, he was surrounded by complete silence. Not because no one was around, but because everyone around him was lying to themselves about their most basic feelings. Sitting in that bathroom, Ethan faced the same choice Trevor and all the others had faced. He could follow Trevor's path, disappear, give up, let the weight of human self-deception crush him. Or he could find another way. But what other way was there? He couldn't turn off the ability. He couldn't unhear what he'd already heard. He couldn't go back to the comfortable ignorance of believing people's words at face value. That's when he noticed something. In the silence of the bathroom, away from other people's thoughts, he could hear his own mind clearly for the first time in months. And he realized he was lying to himself too. He'd been telling himself that this curse was about other people's deception, about their lies and their self-serving narratives. But that was just another story. The real truth was simpler and more terrifying. He was hearing people's thoughts because he needed to, because he was just as much of a liar as everyone else. And on some level, he'd always known it. The lightning hadn't chosen him randomly. It had found people who were already disconnected from truth, people who had built their lives on comfortable lies just like everyone else. The difference was, they'd been forced to confront it. Ethan thought about his own lies. How he'd convinced himself he was a good boyfriend while emotionally withdrawing from Amanda. How he'd told himself he was just tired when he was actually scared of intimacy. How he'd built a career in marketing, literally a profession built on crafting false narratives to sell products, while telling himself he was creative and authentic. The ability to hear others' thoughts wasn't a gift or a curse. It was a mirror. And the reason he could only hear genuine thoughts was because he himself was so disconnected from his own genuine thoughts that he needed to hear them from others. Ethan made a decision in that bathroom. Instead of running away like Trevor had, he would learn to live with the truth. All of it, including the truth about himself. He returned to the dinner table and looked at his parents with new eyes. Yes, they were disappointed in him. Yes, they were lying to themselves about their unconditional love. But they were also genuinely trying to be good parents within their limitations. The lies they told themselves weren't malicious, they were protective. They were trying to maintain their relationship with their son despite their own fears and disappointments. "I need to tell you both something," Ethan said. "I've been going through a difficult time lately. Mental health stuff. And I know you're worried about me, even though you don't want to say it directly." His parents exchanged glances. Thank God he's finally acknowledging it, his mother thought. Maybe we can actually help him now, his father added. For the first time in months, Ethan heard their genuine thoughts, not self-deception, not performance, but real concern and love, complicated as it was. "We are worried," his mother admitted aloud. "We didn't know how to bring it up." "I want to get better," Ethan said. "But I need to do it honestly. No more pretending everything is fine when it's not." The conversation that followed was the most honest one Ethan had had with his parents in years. They talked about his struggles, their fears, their imperfect love for each other. And throughout it all, Ethan could hear their thoughts clearly, because they were finally being genuine. 6 months later, Ethan was still hearing people's thoughts. The ability hadn't gone away, and he'd accepted that it probably never would. But he'd learned to live with it differently. He'd started therapy, not to cure his telepathy, but to understand his own relationship with truth. He'd changed careers, leaving marketing to become a counselor for people dealing with trauma and mental health crises. Turns out, being able to hear when people were being genuine versus when they were lying to themselves was actually useful in that field. He'd reached out to the other survivors he could find, Bethany, Isabella, and a few others. They'd started meeting virtually once a month, not as a support group, but as a community of people learning to navigate a world where they could hear truth but was surrounded by self-deception. Most importantly, he'd started a new relationship with himself. Instead of running from his own capacity for self-deception, he'd begun to notice when his own mind went silent, when he was crafting comfortable lies rather than facing difficult truths. Amanda had reached out to him recently. She was dating someone new, but she wanted to apologize for how she'd handled their breakup. "I convinced myself I was being kind by not being direct about my feelings," she said over coffee. "But really, I was just being cowardly. I'm proud of myself for finally being honest about this. It feels good to tell the truth." Ethan smiled. "I appreciate that. I wasn't exactly honest about my own stuff either." They talked for 2 hours, and for the first time since he'd known her, Ethan heard Amanda's genuine thoughts the entire time. She'd learned to stop lying to herself about their relationship, about her own motivations, about what she really wanted from life. As they said goodbye, Amanda asked, "Do you ever miss it? The way things were before, whatever happened to you happened?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he said, "ignorance really is bliss. But I wouldn't go back. The truth is harder to live with, but it's realer. I'm more myself now than I've ever been." "That's the most honest thing he's ever said to me," Amanda thought. And then, aloud, "I'm glad you're doing better, Ethan. You seem more present." Walking home that evening, Ethan reflected on the strange gift he'd been given. Yes, he could hear people's thoughts, but only when they were being genuine. In a world full of performance and self-deception, he'd become a living lie detector, not just for others but for himself. It wasn't the superpower anyone would choose. But maybe, in a world where people were constantly lying to themselves and each other, the ability to recognize genuine truth, however painful, was exactly what was needed. The thoughts of strangers still flooded his mind as he walked through the city. The genuine ones, anyway. And for the first time since this all began, Ethan found himself grateful for every honest thought he heard, even the cruel ones. Because in a world full of comfortable lies, the truth, any truth, was precious. And if you're listening to this story right now, thinking about your own relationship with truth, about the lies you tell yourself and others, about the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be, well, maybe you're hearing something genuine too. Maybe we all have the ability to hear truth if we're brave enough to listen. The question is, are you ready for what you might hear?